Hi, I'm Steve Borey, author of the American Casino Guide book. If you're not familiar with us, be sure to visit our website at americancasinoguidebook.com. Joining me today is my son, Matt Borey, who is the editor of the American Casino Guide.
How's it going, everybody? And our video today is on 5 of the most well-known casino cheating scams. All right, so our video today is with Bill Zender, and we've done 2 videos previously with him. This is the third in our 3-part series. And Bill is what's called a casino consultant, and he specializes in table game protection. And his job is to help casinos from having things like what we're about to talk about happen to them. And interestingly enough, we found out after we had this video planned that Bill did consult on these first 3 cases that all involve table games. So here's Bill.
Bill Zender, how are you doing today?
Great, Steve. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Matt is here along with me as usual. And today's topic is 5 famous casino cheating scandals. Now, what we're going to do, your specialty is in table game protection. You have a company where you consult with casinos on table game protection. So we're going to start with first 3 famous cheating scandals that involve table games, and then we're going to talk about 2 that involved electronic machines. So first off, we're going to talk about the Tran gang, and what can you tell us about them?
Wow, that's one time they were considered the ultimate cheating group in the country, and I'm going to go back here in my memory banks, but I think they were the early 2000s going into 2010, 2011. What their scam was is that they were all Asians. Most of them were Asians, I should say. They had a couple Caucasians involved with them, but they would go in and attack the Baccarat game, and they would enlist a dealer to fault shuffle. So what they would do is they would record cards as they would see them, and I can go into more detail on it if you want.
And I'm sorry, but I think Matt has some images he can show along with this.
Yeah. Let's look at that first slide. Okay, what this is, and this was kind of a low-tech scam. One of the guys would sit on the table, and this is we call them scorecards that they hand out to the players, and every casino does it, and they sit there and follow the trends with it. I know they got the board, but they like to use the paper card as well. And what he was doing is he would double up this one individual, and the card that was underneath, he would record the exact cards as they were laying in front of the dealer. Now remember in Baccarat, they bring out 2 cards for the player, 2 cards for the banker. They turn them over. They take a 3rd card to the player if necessary, and a 3rd card to the banker if necessary. It's all based on fixed rules. So as the dealer gets done, and before they go to pick them up, they record them, write them down on a card in order as the cards are being picked up. They get picked up and they get put in the bottom of the discard. So what they were doing is they were recording like the first 10 hands, which is about 50 cards, because you're usually used between 4 and 6. And then the dealer would deal the rest of the game normally. It's all dealt normally, but they worked the deal out with the dealer, and the dealer would fault shuffle when they did the next round. Now, remember, all those pre-recorded cards are in the bottom of that discard rack. So they would come out with the cards, bring them out, start doing their shuffle. It's all manual shuffles in those days. And when they got to the bottom, they would do a fault shuffle. And the fault shuffle was, instead of shuffling the cards together, they would actually put this is where the recorded cards are. They would go like this, and they would keep them all together. And so as they played into the next shoe, they would watch for this series of cards, and it would come back in reverse order.
Now let me hop in here. So there's 2 reasons that this worked at the beginning. One is that in Baccarat, all the everything is built in. The rules are all, the number of cards that you take are all built into the game, the rules of the game itself. So you're always going to be taking the same number of cards. It's not like blackjack where you have the option to hit or stand. So and then the other reason is, like you said, these scorecards. It's not like they were cheating with these scorecards and brought them in themselves. The casinos give these out to people at every mini baccarat table you ever go to, and it's because people like, and they're allowed to. You could the pit boss will sit there and watch you writing on the scorecard, and they don't care.
And that's correct. And to tell you the truth, where they cheat, where they break the law, is where they get the dealer to do this false shuffle.
Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, now we've got a pattern, and you pointed out one important factor there, is you said that there are no ways to take a hit or change. So the rules are set. The hit stand rules are set for baccarat. So they can actually, once they acquire, we call acquire the sequence, they say, oh, I see where the sequence starts that I wrote down now. They can go forward and figure out what each hand is going to do, whether it's going to win or lose. So they can bet it with this knowledge. Do me a favor, go to the next slide. Now this is something I took out of Canada. Now, a guy named Dave Woodward, who was an investigator from Manitoba Lottery, had problems going to court and trying to convince people this was cheating. So what they did is a storyboard, and this is just a portion of the storyboard. They show, and if you see on the left, the cards are on the table and being picked up at 23:27, 11:27, and at night, and 11:28. And 2 hours later, the same cards come back in reverse order. So that proves that they were false shuffle. So what we're going to be talking about, which is funny, that the 3 card game scams we're talking about today all involve to learning the sequence of the shuffled cards. So when they learn the sequence of the cards, they know which ones are going to win or lose. They know if the player hand's going to lose, they know if the banker hand's going to lose, and even know when the tie occurs, and they can bet those with that knowledge. So you're betting with a guaranteed winner.
Yeah, Bill, I got a question for you on this one. Okay, so they know the order of the cards coming out, but what if someone else sits at the table? I mean, does it matter how many people are at the table? If someone they don't know comes and sits at the table, would it destroy their playing system for it?
No, because the cards are being handled by the dealer, and unlike blackjack, the players do not touch they don't get any cards. There's a squeeze version, but there's no more than 6 cards are ever going to come out. As minimum of 4, maximum of 6, and that's it. The problem that they ran into, because I did work on the Tran Gang scam with the U.S. Attorney's Office out of the state of Washington, and what the bad guys ran into was that players would see them and realize what they were doing. Other players, and they would jam the tables and try to get their bets in to follow these guys. So when they were trying to bet more money, they basically had to push the players off the table so they could get their bets in.
Well, that's interesting because I went to Macau and I was speaking to someone who gambles there a lot. And evidently for Asians in general over there, they follow, if someone's hot at the table, they follow the betting pattern of that person at the table. So I could see that easily happening. Now, one thing we didn't mention here is that, and I wanted to mention that if people want to look this up, the Tran Gang, that's Tran, they have their own Wikipedia page. Now, how many casino cheaters have their own Wikipedia page? So this was a famous case. So if people want to go ahead and look it up, they can. Just they have their own Wikipedia page and gives details on what happened.
And we figured that they started out actually in San Diego County, and that's where they were convicted. And they started in San Diego County, worked their way up through California, Washington, Oregon. And then they got into Canada. They came back down to the eastern seaboard of the United States, came across the country, and ended up in Las Vegas. And this was over about, I'm going to say about a 10-year period.
Wow.
And we figured that they conservatively won between the United States and Canada, about $15 million.
Wow.
It's amazing that it lasted that long. That's
now my
incredible.
question is how did the casinos not catch that the dealers were doing the false shuffles?
Well, the false shuffle is designed to fool surveillance.
Oh, okay.
When you go to shuffle like this, you're looking down, and as the cards come together, it looks like they're shuffling them.
Uh-huh.
They even figured a way out. They did what you call a wash of the cards. And these guys came up with a system where they could wash faults.
Wow.
So they wash the cards over the top of this slug that they had collected. And it always was 50 to 60 cards. And I want to point out one more thing is that they tried to do this in blackjack as well, but it doesn't work so good for obvious reasons that people take hits and they'd have to take up the whole table.
All right. Huh. All right, so that was our first one, the Tran Gang, and now we're going to go to another table game, again Baccarat, and part of the reason these people try and cheat so much at Baccarat is because it's a game where a lot of money is bet, I guess, or is it? I don't know. Is there another reason, Bill? They
I would think it's
Baccarat?
because of what we spoke about earlier, where it would be the easiest way to sequence the cards, no? Because there's all the rules are built in, so it's always going to be the same cards.
Well, that's I'll tell you what, that's a good point, and that's why they couldn't take it to the blackjack. But this group here, Tran Gang, are like at one time we looked at them, they're the greatest. I should say the most infamous. But they only attack North America. It's almost like the flu. I'm not going to go any further with that one, but it's almost like the flu. It comes out of the Far East most of the time because Baccarat is such a big game there. So they develop these scams in the Far East, and then they move into North America. So move on. You can move on from there, and I'll explain on the next one.
Yeah, number 2 on our list is the Cutters group, Cutters, the Cutters.
Yeah. Now the Cutters, now again, this came out of the Far East. What they did was they understood, and you could see by the other one how important it is to get the sequence of cards. In the Tran Gang, they actually had to enlist dealers, and anytime you enlist more people into the scam, it's more likely to be found, right? So what these guys are doing is they're trying to come up with a way they can get that sequence without involving the dealer. And so what they did with this one is you can see on the left side, there's a picture of a guy with his hand and sleeve, and there's a camera in there. What he would do in the act of cutting the cards, he would take the cut card that they give you to cut, because in Baccarat you cut the card just like you would blackjack, and they give him the cut card and he drags it over the top for good luck. But as he's dragging it over the top, he's got a little piece of plastic, a little plastic hook on his finger, and he's riffling up the corners of the cards. And the picture on the right shows you what the camera sees, and you can clearly see that index corner. See that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, yeah.
You clearly see it. So what he's doing is he's riffling down, and they're actually videotaping or video recording, because it's all digital, this sequence. So instead of going after 50 cards, they were going after most of the shoe. There's 416 cards. If you go after half the shoe, that's a lot of hands, right? And so, we're talking 20, at least 20 hands instead of just, maybe 5 or 6. So these guys would do that. Now the casinos at first didn't snap to this, and so towards the end, when they figured this out, the casinos did one simple thing. Instead of the dealer presenting the cards to cut with their left hand, is what these guys want, they presented them to cut with their right hand. And the reason why, when you present with the left hand, that index corner that they're targeting is pointed towards the players where they get to it. But when you use your right hand, the index corners are against my hand as a dealer, so they couldn't do it anymore. We think conservatively that these guys earned, and there were several teams, earned about $70 million.
Wow, that is a lot of money. And by the back to what you were just speaking about, the index corner, of course, that is the corner that shows what the value of the card is, because it's the two values of the card are on opposite corners. So if, like he was saying, if you present with your left hand, you get the corner that has all the cards, but if you turn the deck around, you're getting the blank corner on the opposite, or on the below it or above it.
And there's a funny thing, Matt, is that going to the World Game Protection Conference, I'm sitting there and I'm talking to people, And there's a guy from South America, and he was telling me about this scam that was going down. I talked to someone from Mexico, and they were telling me about this scam. I'm talking to a guy from Switzerland, and he was telling me about the scam that they had right on the border of France and Switzerland. And it's the same thing. So these guys went all over the world doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was an article somewhere I read, and maybe it was Wired again, I'm not sure, but it was about they suspected this was happening. They knew something was up at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas, but they did not check the person for a camera. Are you familiar with that one, Bill?
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into that because it's kind of embarrassing for my buddies at the Gaming Control Board. But the thing was that these guys came in and played at the Cosmopolitan about a week before. They played at another casino in that area, and they didn't know it. And they were beaten for about 400,000, and they had the Cosmopolitan stuck pretty good. I can't remember the exact number on that. I think it was close to $1 million. Mm-hmm. And so they let the Gaming Control Board know, but they had their hands tied. The board did on how well they could search these guys. They couldn't get a personal search, so they just kind of had to let them go because, you've got the camera. What you're doing is you got the camera, then you have a PDA or a smartphone someplace on your body. They would do the cut, then they would get off the table, walk in the men's room, make sure they had enough on this PDA recorded. If for some reason there was a mistake or didn't have enough information, they'd go back out, ask for recut, and do it again. We want a new shoe. Okay. Do it again.
Well, I have one more question, please, on the way this worked. So what did they relay this information to someone else and use an earpiece or something to have them tell them what order the cards were coming in, or how did, so they have the images, they know what order the cards are coming in. When were they able to see that to know how to bet?
Steve, I think what they did was they originally, after they recorded it, they took that recording and put it on an Excel spreadsheet, and then they sent it in back to the person or some other person in there who put it on their smartphone and was reading it off the smartphone. But after a while, what we think might have happened is once they acquired the sequence, all they had to do is say, okay, here are the 6 cards that have come out lately. And they'll say, okay, you're in the sequence. And then they would send them, say, at this hand, bet this, at this hand, bet that, at this hand, bet that. And you would say, well, how would we get the number? How do they know what round it is? The scoreboard has the round on.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
When we get to the next group that you're going to bring up, they were using the scoreboard to determine when to make the bets.
I believe in the article I read about this, the cutters, I believe they said that when they went to the bathroom, they were handing it off to somebody else in the stall next to them, and then that person was going out and analyzing it all.
Well, they might have. I mean, you didn't have to.
But I think it was all speculation. So, but I think they were saying that was what was likely happening.
There's so many, because you can see the power of gaining the card sequence. There have been so many scams based on this. This is just one group. I mean, I've worked a couple of these for both the state of California, federal government, and it's amazing. It's amazing.
All right, so that was the Cutters group. And now we're going to move on to number 3, again with Baccarat. This was the Singapore Baccarat sequence scam.
Right.
This one, I think, was the ballsiest of all. I like this one. This one had kind of an Ocean's 11 vibe to me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can say that again.
Uh-huh.
And I think, go ahead and advance this. There we go. Now, here's one. Again, we know this gaining the sequence is really important. So this group of people, there was actually about 40 people involved in this. The Singapore government actually arrested 14 of them. They all went on trial. I was fortunate enough to be the expert witness in this case. But what they did was they didn't write the sequence down. They didn't use a camera to cut. But what they did was they stole a card carrier with 8 decks in it out of this podium. Now this podium's on a casino floor in a high limit salon. with several cameras on it, okay? They stole it out, put it in a woman's purse, went back to the hotel, cracked open the carrier, took a camera and videotaped the index corners, or I should say video recorded them, put it back together again, brought it back into the casino, and took them 21 minutes from the time they left to the time they got back, and they put it in the podium. And in 15 hours later, a floorman took that shoe out. And they could recognize it. He took the shoe out, put it in a baccarat game, and they beat the game for $4 million.
Now I was a little confused, but I guess they have different procedures there in Singapore. They pre-shuffle the 8 decks and then lock them up somewhere.
That's a good point, and that's what they did. Now they go through. Well, no, they've got, like, let's say they have 800 baccarat games there. I mean, we're not talking about 2 or 3. I mean, we're talking about a lot because it's very popular in the Far East. So what they do is they take the 8 decks and they pre-shuffle them, and they put them in these plastic carriers, and they put a secure latch on it with a code, so that they would transport these carriers, these plastic carriers up, and put them into rooms. And this is one of the security podiums where they keep it. On the right side of the podium, there's actually 4 drawers there, 4 doors, I should say. On the right side of the podium, they keep the new cards. On the left side, they keep the used cards. And there's always a par or, a set amount of cards in there. If they're not in there, they're on the table. So anyway, they pre-shuffle them and put them here. And then when they have them, they bring them out to the table when they need them. The dealer scans the card, the security code on the tag, opens them up in front of the floorman, puts them in the shoe, right? They cut them, and they put them in the shoe, and they deal. And the reason they do this is to move the game along. They want to get those cards on the table and out there so they can make more money. And time is money. And when you shorten the time period, you're making more money. And that's
I don't know about Singapore, but I know in Macau they have a huge, very, very high limit industry in the baccarat games, where people are betting hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a hand. Is it the same in Singapore, I guess?
Yeah, in this room, right here in this room, I think the table limit was 200,000 Singapore, which is Singapore dollar is almost like a Canadian dollar. So 200,000 be like $175,000 US. Now, at one time, Singapore, at the Marina Bay Sands, they had $1 million limit, but they've since then dropped it down to only 750,000. So, they say Willie Sutton said, "Why do you rob?" They say, "Why do you rob banks?" And Willie Sutton said, "Because that's where the money is." So this is why these big scams start out in the Far East, because that's where the money is, right? So all these guys come up with ways to beating this. Now you see this podium, and you notice that I've got here, and I have to move my image out of the way. This is at 21:30 hours, and you've got a podium, and there's a couple people standing there, and there's no big thing. Advance it one slide, Matt. Now look at it. Now, I've got this thing covered. Now remember, there's several camera angles coming down on this podium to protect those cards. Now I've got the people I've got a name, and I've got an arrow pointing to them. And the reason I did this is I want you to look at the position of these people. We've got the guy, gray hoodie, standing there. We've got a red jersey, this big guy, real big guy, white shirt. And then the guy with the key is the one leaning over the podium, and he sticks the key, and we're not sure how they got the key, but there's a lot of ways you could buy it or have somebody make one. And they're very secure locks, by the way, very expensive secure locks. But he gets the key in there, he turns it, opens up the door, reaches in, pulls out a carrier, and they place it in one of the girls' purses, right? So then they leave the podium, they closes it, leaves the podium, the girl walks up to the hotel with a couple other guys, they get it up there, they analyze the sequence. All they're doing is recording it, putting it back together, bringing it back down on the floor, and then they're going to put it back in. So advance to the next slide. Now this is 10 minutes later. Nobody's there. They all left, you know, it's something better to do. Now this is, again, we're going to advance it approximately another 10 minutes, which is 21 minutes from the first time. Look at that. Then you say, oh, that's the same picture, because but you get the red jerseys in the same spot and a white shirt guys in the same spot. The gray hoodie moved over to the other side. And then you got the guy, now you can see the guy a little bit more clearly. It's got the key. And what he's going to do is open it up, grab the carrier out of the girl's purse, put it back in there, close it.
Now he had to reach across that counter to put this back in there?
No, it's right there.
It's under his shoulder. The
right
people that are holding the newspaper are covering the vertical.
Oh, it's underneath the podium? It's out?
Yeah. So he's got, it looks like he's got his right arm underneath their newspaper, and that's what he's doing it all. Because look, he's holding the magazine with his left hand. So he's got his right hand underneath doing everything.
I thought it was across from him there. Okay, now I understand. It's underneath. Okay.
So that's crazy. I said this had an Ocean's 11 feel before I saw these pictures. With these pictures, it's even crazier. This was like straight out of Ocean's 11.
The way, I'm going to tell you something. I have to say one thing. I think Marina Bay Sands has got one of the best surveillance teams in the world, right? How they caught this is after the $4 million was won on the game, they went back and they followed the cards in reverse because they figured there was something wrong with the cards and they weren't sure. And they followed it to the podium. And in 15 hours after they got to the podium, they see this. And then they see this happen twice. And then they keep playing it back and they see where the cards went, you know, because it's going in reverse, come up from the card control room. They went back and looked at the card control room, look at the process there, went all the way back to where the cards came in on the loading dock. Okay. And that's how they did it, because they saw this and then started to investigate. And the scary part is that I talked to one of the investigators at the casino. Now I did the work for the Singapore Police Department, but one of the investigators at the casino said they started running these people's names, the big players that won the money, and they started coming back to all these different casinos throughout the Far East. So they don't know how many times these guys have done it at different casinos.
Yeah. But that was the only one where they actually caught them doing it.
Yeah. Yes, they did. And they ended up convicting 13 people because one of the guys died during the trial.
Well, that was a crazy one. I got to tell you, it's like Matt said, you know, Ocean's 11. It was
so
it was really good.
We can't compute how much they won.
Okay. All right. So I think that's it for table games. Now we're going to move on to electronic machines. And I was talking before about the Tran Gang had their own Wikipedia page, but also Ronald Harris has his own. Sometimes he's Ron Harris, sometimes he's Ronald Harris. And this was an interesting one. So this is number 4, Ron Harris. And I wrote an article about him years ago, many years ago, sort of explaining what happened. If someone wants to Google it, just Google the term world's greatest slot sheet, and it'll show up there by Steve Worry.
Now, not to be biased or anything, but when I was doing my research for this video, I did think yours was the best written of all the articles I found on it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to give a little summary of my article here and explain how this happened. And well, you'll see. Okay, in January 14th, 1995, a guy named Reed Errol McNeil went into the Bally's Park Place Casino in Atlantic City. He bought $100 worth of Keno tickets, 10 tickets at $10 each with 8 numbers picked on each card. The odds of winning were 230,000 to 1, and he won. He won $100,000. It was the highest amount ever won on a Keno game in the history of Atlantic City. But
let me cut you off. The odds of him winning were not that. The odds of him going 8 for 8. He got all 8 numbers right.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for the clarification, Matt Borey. Okay. So they went to give him his money. He didn't seem like a typical winner. They said, this is a little weird. So if you win any jackpot of $35,000 or more in New Jersey, they have to call out the state gaming division and they have to verify that everything's okay. So they asked him to go to his room, and when they went to his room, they found this other guy there named Ronald Harris, and they saw this computer equipment, and they didn't know what was happening, so they brought him back downstairs. So they were just making checking out the oddness of the situation. So then later they found out, was they started doing some investigating, they found out that Harris had worked for the Nevada Gaming Control Board, and he had actually been working there for 12 years. So they knew something was fishy. They arrested this guy in New Jersey. Harris left. He went to Nevada, and they picked him up when he got off the airplane. So once that happened, they charged him with computer fraud, both of them. And then now, the guy who won flipped on Ron Harris. Yes, Matt.
Well, what I was going to say is all the other things that we went over, the first 3 cheats, those guys all got caught because they got greedy. What's interesting about this one, the only reason they got caught is when that guy won that $100,000 Keno jackpot, he didn't have his driver's license on him. He didn't have any form of ID.
Which was really stupid. I didn't quite understand it. I forgot to mention that part. Yes, he did not. He had no ID. How are you going to pay someone $100,000 without an ID? So anyway, so after he got arrested for this, they went back and said, well, what had this guy done for the Nevada Gaming Control Board? But as part of his job, he would have to check these slot machine EPROMs, the little chips in there that control the payback percentage. So after 5 months, 5 months later, they arrested him again for fixing slot machine jackpots, where he changed the EPROM. EPROM stands for erasable programmable read-only memory. So he would erase the stuff on the chip, and he would reprogram it. So I think if coins were put in a certain sequence on a slot machine, it would automatically pay out a jackpot. And then he would send his friends in to say, okay, I think it was you put in like 5 coins and 2 coins and 3 coins, and boom, it'll pay a jackpot. And then he was eventually charged with rigging at least 24 jackpots. And he wound up pleading guilty, and he was sentenced to 7 years in jail. Bill, you have any background on that too?
Well, I was with the Nevada Game Control Board, but that was in the 70s and early 80s. So I didn't know who Ron Harris was until this incident. And being the curious person I am, I got a hold of a couple of my buddies that were still with the Nevada Game Control Board at the time. And so this is a hearsay, but they were telling me that what he did was the EPROMs, he figured out a way to burn a subroutine into the EPROMs. So what he was doing is going into the machines. What Gaming Control Board would randomly inspect slot machines before they left the company. I think it was IGT, could have been IGTN balance for that matter. And so he went in, and he would, when he was inspecting, he would swap out the PROM that was in there for his own with the subroutine in it. He'd then look at there's a plate on the side of it with serial number, and he would record that. And then after he was done, he would go down and pull up the printout and see where all the machines went. Oh, this one went to the Stardust, that one went to the Desert Inn, this one went to Atlantic City. We knew where all these machines had gone. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was that. But I also heard, and I don't know, I've never substantiated this one, that he was able to crack the random number generator that was on the Keno machines. And I guess it was a very, very weak random generator. So he could actually use his computer to get in sync with the random number generator on the Keno machine, and he could predict when to push the button to get a jackpot.
Now, does he have access to the actual source code that creates these random number generators?
Yeah, he'd have to have. And the thing is, what he was doing by burning in the EPROMs is he's burning a subroutine. If he did that, he has to have source codes. Now, let's say we want to protect against that. What we have is a comparator. It looks like a board about this big, and you put in the PROM that you have that you know is clean, and then you pull the PROM that's out of the machine and put it in there, and you can test them. But in the old days, those testers, the comparators, could not pick out the subroutines. So even
Uh-huh.
if somebody had gone in there and pulled his chip out that he put in there and put it in the comparator, they wouldn't have seen it. So that's the bad thing is this guy was a Nevada Gaming Control agent when he was doing this. So it was a real black eye for the Gaming Control Board. Is probably one of the best regulators in the country. So.
Now, one thing I think he was able to win this Keno because in Atlantic City, you know, a lot of people think of a Keno lounge. You're not playing a little Keno machine. You're like in a Keno lounge, and a lot of them have these balls that are blown out. So they didn't have it in Atlantic City. They had electronic Keno. So he was trying to match up the random number generator to predict what was going to come out. And I think from some of the articles I read, he didn't expect to get 8 of 8. He didn't think he was going to get that. I think he thought he was going to get a lower amount, and he was just testing to see how accurate he could be. But it sort of blew up in his face. So, Matt, any questions?
Too good for his own good.
All right, so that's number 4 was Ron Harris. Again, he has his own Wikipedia page if you want to go check that out.
Now, number 5, I'll hop in on this. Number 5 is an interesting one. It is a Russian group that what they did was they had somehow, in 2009, in Russia, they banned all casinos. So all these casinos that were in Russia had all these leftover slot machines that they had to get rid of. So they were just selling them to anyone to try and recoup some of their money. So I guess what happened is some rather unsavory characters bought some of these slot machines and somehow managed to reverse engineer them. And I guess they had all these slot machines that they had bought from these closed down Russian casinos. And what they did is they kept messing with them, and they sort of figured out how to know, not necessarily exactly when it was going to hit a jackpot, but certain time periods of when these machines were going to be doing better than other time periods. And what happened is I believe it was somewhere in the Midwest. It was, I think, Lumiere Place in Missouri. And they had a surveillance guy had seen where there was they came in. I think what they did is they came in and they videotaped the machine while they were playing it for a little bit, and then got the results, and then sent it back to Russia, and then they ran that, used the video that they sent to sort of figure out where in the random number set it was. And then what they did is they had their own app that they had built, and so once they came back to the machines, the surveillance people saw them looking at an app with their button hovering over the spin, and apparently the app told them within a quarter of a second when they needed to start mashing the spin button to get in that favorable time period. Are you familiar with this one at all? It's still a lot of, I did a lot of research on this, and it was still very iffy, where I don't even think anybody's quite sure exactly how it worked, but.
It isn't. And the thing was, the FBI got involved in this. I talked to a few people the guy from Lemure was actually corporate with Pinnacle Gaming. There's corporate surveillance person. They originally thought they were using machines to money launder, but that didn't turn out to be that. So what happened was the information that they had, and you said, I mean, I agree with everything you said, is that they got a hold of the random number generator. Now I'm going like this. They shouldn't do that because it's a code. It's something that's written in like, in basic language. And there's no such thing as a random number generator. And they actually call it a pseudo random number generator. It's the closest we have to randomness that they're going to be able to use. But there was a guy who's real sharp, computer whiz, young guy in his 20s in Russia, who went ahead and reverse engineered the number generators they were using. And one of I think it was Novomatic was the name of the company that he first cracked. So he cracked one of them, and then he started to crack another one, and they figured out how they could use that information. And so you're right. What they did was, after they've got the sequence for that machine based on that random number generator, they would walk into a casino that had the same model. They would actually videotape they'd play it and videotape it. And they'd play for like, I don't know, half hour. And then they would take that information, ship it back to Russia. The Russians would look at it and they'd figure out where it was aligned with the random number generator. And then they would get back to these guys and say, we want you to go down and play that machine between like 10 o'clock at night and 10:10, max coins. Because they're analyzing it and tell them you're going to have the best opportunities to get a winning hand. So that's what they would do. And they did it all over the world. And then they cracked another machine and another machine and another machine.
And for the record, this was not like Ron Harris where it was in the 70s or the 80s. This was in 2014 when they did this. So this was a relatively recent one.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we're talking, light years ahead. And in fact, Harris cracked one that was simple, and these guys are cracking stuff that's complex. And the first thing that the slot manufacturers did when they heard about this, I have a friend of mine was at Bally's at the time, is they rewrote the random number generator. Because a random number generator, it starts off with a seed number, and then you add and subtract so much, and they use the number that they get is like about, maybe a couple hundred digits long. They take the last digit, and that's what they use for their numbers. So the thing was, is if you have enough time to crack, you can crack any number generator, from what I understand, and this is exactly what these guys did. And the feeling was that they were very conservative in their play because they only won about $10 million a year. And only, yeah. And but when you think about the slot industry, 10 million is nothing. So they're hoping a lot of casinos will look at this. Is this the price of doing business?
Yeah, well, in the article that I read, it said that the individual scammers typically win more than $10,000 per day. And he said that the operatives were trying to keep their winnings less than $1,000 per spin to avoid suspicion. Because as anybody that plays slot machines knows, if you hit a $1,200 or more jackpot, at least in America, you got to get a W-2G, and then there's tax forms involved.
Right. And I'll tell you what, you're quoting the Wired article.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was probably that's the best article on these guys if you're interested.
Yeah, it said that at one point they were making up to $250,000 a week, which is nothing to shake a stick at. There's a lot of people that would be quite okay with making $250,000 a week.
We can send them coupons.
Yeah, I want to go off on another tangent here, talking about the random number generators, and I want to relate an article on a story. And I don't know if Bill, if you know this, you probably know this one. In Casino Montreal, when they first opened, the guy who won the big Keno jackpot. Are you familiar with that one?
No, I'm not.
All right, so this was another one. I wrote this. God, I don't know when this was, in the 80s and 90s, when Casino Montreal first opened. They had electronic Keno, and so this guy was another one of these like Ron Harris things. So the guy won 8 out of 8, and they said, "Well, that's crazy. We're going to investigate this."
But I think he did it multiple times.
No, I think he just did it this one time.
Oh.
And it was the first time he won, and they all got very suspicious. So it was electronic Keno, and again, they use a random number generator, and it had been successfully used in Nevada for years and years, and they put one in this casino in Canada. But in Nevada, the casinos were open 24 hours, and the casino in Montreal was closed. So at night they'd shut off the machine, and then the next day they turn the machine back on. And like you said before, it's got a seed point. So this guy would sit there in the Keno lounge, and he'd write these numbers down every day and seeing what was coming in. And I don't know, somehow was it using the same seed pattern every day? Every time you turn it on, it uses the same seed pattern, and he just bet the numbers that had come in before. And he won, and they paid him, and that was the end of the story. There was no cheating. But that one was very intriguing, but I don't quite understand if the exact same numbers came up every day, how the casino could not know it.
Steve, there's a kind of a similar story. The old Kentucky Derby horse race.
Oh, yeah.
You're old enough to know when the horses actually
yes.
on the track. was that if you unplugged it and plugged it back in, the first so many horses that won the day before are going to be the same ones again in that day. So there was people who were going around unplugging and plugging it back in.
Oh, I've seen those machines. I didn't know they were doing that though. That's crazy.
Well, they changed them, but it took them years to do it.
Oh, okay. So, but it's a very similar situation. So I forget what the guy won. I don't know, 50,000, 70,000, 80,000, whatever it was. But if people want to Google it, I'm sure it's out there on the internet. So, all right. So those were our look at the top five famous casino cheating scams. Bill, as always, it's a pleasure. If people want to find out more about you and your work, how would they do that?
Well, I have my website. It's www.billzender. That's one word, BILLZENDER .com, excuse me. And then I have my email is wzender@aol.com.
Okay, it was great talking to you, and thanks again very much.
Steve, Matt, this has been a pleasure on my part. Thank you very much.
All right, take care.
All right, so that does it for our interview with Bill Zender. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment below, let us know what you think, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click on the bell to turn on all notifications so you never miss any of our other great videos.
Yeah, and if you like to play at internet casinos, don't forget we have another website at AmericanCasinoBonuses.com. If you go there, there's about 25 to 30 different offers. You can try out these casinos without having to deposit any money or putting up any credit card information. Again, AmericanCasinoBonuses.com. Thanks very much for watching, and best wishes for good luck in the casinos.